Hey guys, and welcome to another video. The cable I ordered to connect this GTX 460 to my 1080p monitor finally arrived. Now, let's get to it and see how it does in 1080p gaming. In the previous video, I showed you guys the performance of the $28 GTX 460 I got on Shopee. However, I was only able to test it in 720p because it only had 2 DVI ports and 1 mini HDMI port. I tried using a VGA to DVI adapter on one end and a VGA to HDMI on the other. Unfortunately, it didn't work. I quickly went online and placed an order for a mini HDMI to HDMI cable, and I availed the Doggo Express shipping and got it the day after. Not really. Not even close. I also mentioned in the previous video that I'll be building a budget PC to partner with this graphics card. While I'm waiting for the parts, I transferred this GPU to my brother's 6-year-old PC, which has an i5-4440 and 8GB of DDR3. After installing the graphics card and connecting it to my 1080p monitor, 60Hz was the only option showing up in 1080p. This monitor being 144Hz, I wanted to see if we can get at least 120Hz. I created a custom resolution setting by going to the NVIDIA control panel and tweaked the refresh rate. And even though I'm not using DisplayPort, I still tried going 144Hz but had issues with it. 120Hz was a bit better but still caused flickering from time to time. Setting it to 120Hz did the job. For this part, I really just played with the settings. I'm not really sure if it's really a thing to mess around with your refresh rate even though the default was only up to 60Hz. Nonetheless, I really didn't have any issues with it. Moving on to the benchmarks, we have 8 games in our lineup, starting with Valorant. With the results of the previous test with this GPU, it's no surprise that this game still runs smoothly in 1080p. In high settings, it averaged an FPS of 158, which is pretty good, but turning things down to low did provide a decent increase with an average FPS of 174. Low settings would be recommended as much as possible for this GPU since more FPS can really give you an edge in first-person shooter games. Next is CSGO. The game defaulted into high settings, and although it was playable with an average FPS of 50, turning it down to low improves the performance drastically with an average FPS of 106. Once again, you want to squeeze out every single frame you can get from your hardware when playing competitive games, especially first-person shooters. For Fortnite, low settings was really the only way to go. The game averaged an FPS of 49, however, unlike 720p where we can max out the resolution scale to 100%, in 1080p, the frames were playable but the game encountered some glitches. Turning it down to 70% did solve the issue and provided an average FPS of 73. Overall, this card can still do 1080p gaming in Fortnite. Next, we have GTA 5. I'm really starting to love benchmarking with this game. Every time I run this game is another opportunity for me to dazzle you guys with my professional, awesome, Need for Speed driving skills that defies the laws of physics. With texture quality set to high and everything on normal, we got an average FPS of 62. It does drop to the 50s on some occasions depending on the scene that you're in, but mostly it's above 60 FPS. Turning on FXAA to smoothen those jagged edges did make the frames drop to an average of 51. But in my opinion, for games like GTA 5, sacrificing a couple of frames to get rid of those jagged edges is really worth it. Next is Dota 2 with the best looking preset. We got an average FPS of 42, which isn't bad for a MOBA. However, if you're playing competitively, I would recommend turning down the settings to medium with all effects turned off except for anti-aliasing. This provided an average FPS of 88, which is more than enough for you to have a good gaming experience in Dota 2. PUBG on the other hand is a really struggle for this card. Having the settings on very low and the resolution scale set to 100%, the experience wasn't really enjoyable. It had an average FPS of 24, but turning it down to 70% did improve a bit with an average of 38. It's still not the best for playing this game, but if you can bear with it then sure, go ahead. But if you're like me who's had this game for 3 years and still hasn't won a single match, you're really at a disadvantage. Next we have the 2013 Tomb Raider. The game averaged an FPS of 48 in high settings and 61 on normal. This is quite an old game, but it does still look nice. I'm also thinking of getting Horizon Zero Dawn and adding it to future benchmarks. Let me know in the comments what's your experience with that game and if that's something you'd be interested in. Lastly, we have Battlefield 1 with the lowest preset. This is probably the best playable settings you can have, with the resolution scale set to 70%, the game average and FPS of 59. However, do expect it to drop even further in multiplayer or in missions that are much more demanding. Warzone and Monster Hunter World in this case are out of the question since these games won't even launch with this particular GPU. I doubt that we'll even get playable frame rates if the games were able to launch. For a GPU that's worth $28 or 1,390 pesos, I think this is actually a good deal, especially with the status of the used market here in the Philippines or pretty much all over the world. It can do 1080p gaming on certain games with a couple of tweaks. However, I do believe that if you're lucky enough, there will be deals out there in your area wherein you can just add a bit more to your $28 and you can have a better GPU other than this GTX 460. You just have to keep your eyes open. It just so happens that there's really almost no good deals for lower end cards in my area. That wraps up this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, definitely hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and I'll see you guys on the next one.